on the News Channel 5 network. This is MorningLine.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Beres here with you on a Wednesday. Good show on tap. We're going to open up the phone lines in just a moment here as we shift gears from what we've been doing earlier this week to getting into trying to help you with legal questions you may have. It's Ask an Attorney. All right. Part of the whole thing here is deciding whether or not you need an attorney when you're dealing with an issue there. And we're not going to talk about eye care this morning, though, but we are going to talk, and we're going to have the information up for Andy Allman as we talk, I don't know, employment law and everything else. Good morning to you, Andy. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
All right, you've seen him before. To know him, to love him. Andy does, as I say, work employment law, but he has a broad background behind that can answer other questions in general. We'll give that a shot. But if you would, tell folks basically what you spend most of your time on.
At our firm, we represent employees. Anyone who has had some type of adverse employment action in the workplace. They've been terminated, demoted, suspended. They've been retaliated against for some reason. Most of our clients come to us. They feel like they have been fired or treated unfairly because of a disability. Maybe they have filed a workers' compensation claim. They may have been engaged in some whistleblower activity, been the victim of sexual harassment in the workplace. Right. They may be in an environment where their race is the reason that they've had some adverse employment action. Their gender, their age, their national origin, their religion. Any of those particular categories, we help those employees out to try and right a wrong.
You know, I see more and more companies, including this one here that we work for at Channel 5, that I think do a very good job of trying to pay attention to what is socially acceptable in terms of sexual discrimination and all this. We have special training so that we recognize what's appropriate and what's not. And I know there's really two edges to that sword. One, they want to make sure that we don't offend people, or that I don't say something that's offensive to someone, or vice versa, that could fall into that category. But also by these companies doing this, does that afford them some type of protection should some rogue employee make a comment that produces a sexual discrimination lawsuit or something like that? That kind of training does it?
It does, and it's a twofold protection. Number one, what you're hoping is that the training that's afforded to the employees prevents that from happening.
Absolutely.
Second, if a company does have a claim filed against it for some type of discrimination or harassment, or when we talk about comments or slurs or remarks, we talk more along the lines of a hostile work environment,
right?
That they can show a judge or show a jury, we had the proper mechanisms in place, so it is not as though we were kind of sitting back and not really caring about what's going on in the workplace. And a lot of times, juries will take that into consideration in trying to determine, is the company at fault, and what, if any, kind of damage award should be awarded to an employee. Okay,
I figured that comes into play, but I think it's good, that kind of training. Everyone should have
Absolutely,
it to understand that. Real quickly, and we're going to get to the phone lines. They're open if you want, 737-7587. We'll get the number up there at some point here, but you're welcome to join. What does it mean? And Steve Hayslip and Amy and I were talking during the tease. I was just kind of having some fun about this state being, again, I've asked you this before on prior shows. What does it mean when they say this is a right-to-work state in Tennessee? Because I said, and I've told you this before, I think it means employers have the right to fire you.
Well,
that's what I just wonder sometimes. Right. I mean, what does right to work really mean?
Well, that phrase and the phrase employment at will are two phrases that are somewhat overly used, if you will, out in the community, and they kind of lose, well, it's not really that they lose some of their meaning, but a lot more meaning gets heaped upon those phrases than actually exists. In Tennessee, we do say to an employer, look, you have the right to fire an employee for any reason you choose, unless you violate the law. And so what we do is we look at the reason that an employer fired an employee, and we compare that to the list of laws that are out there passed by our legislature to determine if they have in fact violated the law.
Are we talking mostly federal laws here?
Federal and state. Tennessee,
okay.
A lot of Tennessee's employment laws mirror the federal laws that are out there.
Okay.
In fact, our legislature just this past year actually changed or modified employment law in Tennessee in a couple of respects. One of which is employees' damages are now capped the same as the federal damages are capped. So they're capping in the damages that an employee can receive regardless of the conduct of the employer. But when we talk about right to work, we talk about employment at will, employees need to understand that, yes, they've got rights. And an employer can fire you for any reason they choose, unless it is an illegal reason.
Gotcha.
So a lot of employees, unfortunately, just hear that first part of it, that they can fire you for any reason, and they never pursue or look into whether their rights are violated.
Excellent point on this. And let me just ask you, and I know as an attorney you oftentimes represent the employees, but you've told me before you've represented employers as well. In your opinion, is Tennessee law and the way it's set up more friendly to the employee or the employer?
The employer.
I agree.
There's no doubt. And you're going to find...
And I'm not saying that's good or bad. You may say that's bad, but I agree. I think it is set up... Okay, but go on. I didn't mean to
Well,
interrupt
I mean,
No.
you simply just have to look at the makeup of our legislature. I mean, our employment laws come from our legislature. There really isn't a great deal of what we call common law that protects employees. So when we talk about someone being fired because of their age or their disability or a workers' compensation claim, the right to pursue that claim is given to the employee by the elected officials, by the House of Representatives and the State Senate. Okay? So you can look at the makeup of our legislature and kind of get some sense as to what their ideology is, what their philosophy is, and that goes into the laws that they create.
And sitting back, you look at it, I mean, this is a predominantly Republican, well, predominantly it is a Republican legislature. I would venture to guess it would be fair to say it's pro-business, which creates jobs. And I would venture to guess that many of our lawmakers are those who they're businessmen or women themselves, that it's given them the freedom to run for office. If I someday chose to run for office, I don't see how I could put the time into that with a day job like what I have, be it TV or be it whatever kind of day job. Now, as a lawyer as yourself, I know how busy you are, but at least you kind of run your own practice. You're kind of your own boss, are you not? I mean, your clients are, but you're your own boss. Here, I have a chain of command above me, and I have to answer to them. And so I think you have business people in the legislature who probably see things, well, I own a business, this is something that I think is a good idea.
Sure. And not only and in Tennessee, you know, we have a fairly diverse legislature when you start looking at careers. I mean, we have business people, we have doctors, we have nurses, we have lawyers, we have accountants. And
Not a lot of blue-collar workers, I would venture to guess. And that's probably true in general in legislatures across the country.
Probably so.
Which is a shame, because that's not representative of the workforce as a whole.
That's correct. And I think it goes back to, again, someone who has the time and the resources to run for that office.
Exactly. All right, before we take our first break, let's take a few calls, and we've got the number up, 737-7587. As I said, Andy really knows his stuff when it comes to employment law, but we can take other general legal questions because he certainly has that general legal background. Let's go to Charlie. Oh, no, you know what? Before we do that, let's take Joe called in first, then we'll get Charlie next. Joe, good morning.
Yes, good morning. How are you today?
Good. What can we do for you?
Yes, sir. I have a question about a timeshare week that I own. It's up at Fairfield Glade, and it's deeded. And the maintenance fees have risen from, say, $300 15 years ago to now it's up to over $800.
Woo.
Yes, it's out of sight.
Wait, $800, when? How often do you have to pay that?
Well, it's once a year for the 1 week that I have every week.
Okay.
At Fairfield. And I've since retired. I'm on a fixed income, and I really can't afford this maintenance fee anymore. I can't sell it or give it away because they're, you know, timeshares are worthless now. So I'm thinking about just not paying the fee, ignoring it, and you know, just see what happens. I've checked on the internet, and some of the places have said that Fairfield will probably come at you with a collection agency at first, then file a lawsuit, probably in Crossville, which is where they're located. And if you don't show up at the appointed time, if you're a no-show, that the judge will rule in their favor, and Fairfield will have the right to send a quitclaim deed to me to sign, and they would take over the week. I was wondering how you think it would play out.
Well, real quickly, and I'll let Andy handle this, because I was wondering, I've not dealt with timeshares personally, but so what you're thinking is that they might take your timeshare away from you then. Are you ready to just give up your timeshare and walk away from it?
Exactly. Yes.
Well, then, all right. I guess that's not a problem then. If they get mad and want to do a quick claim, say, you know what, I don't even want it anymore. You can have it back. What do you think he should do legally? And I know that's a little outside your realm, Andy.
Well, he's going to have to go back and look at the contract that he's got with Fairfield, because there are going to be provisions in that contract that are called default provisions that say, you know, what his rights and obligations are and their rights and obligations are if he defaults on the maintenance fee. Okay. Now, he, you know, I would advise him not to just simply ignore the problem, because if it gets sent to a collection agency, if he gets sued and he gets a default judgment against him, that's going to go on his credit report. And so his credit report is going to show that he's in default of a particular contract, and then it's going to show that there's a judgment against him out there that can be executed on. So just ignoring it or not showing up in court, there are other ramifications, if you will, besides just simply losing the week back. It's my understanding that you can actually contact Fairfield and say, you know, the prices have gone up too much. I'm now on a fixed income. I want to surrender this. And then a lot of times Fairfield will just let you surrender it back to them in lieu of having to go through the collection agency issues and going through the judgment. So.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. I don't know if you've done that. Let me just, before we go to the break, Joe, have you brought that up with Fairfield staff yourself yet?
Yes, sir. I've called them wanting to surrender it, and they won't do that. In fact, they want to try to sell you $20,000 more.
It's just such. I'm sorry, that just is crazy. But I mean, what's weird to me, and I don't understand with timeshares, and as I said, I haven't dealt with that. When you initially purchased this timeshare, I guess you said how many years ago?
Probably back in the early 80s.
Early 80s. And when you did that, and of course you didn't know then what you know now, but was your thinking, I'm going to have this timeshare for the rest of my life? I mean, don't timeshares eventually go away, or when you buy into one of those, are you stuck with it for the rest of your life?
You're pretty much stuck with it for the rest of your life, and I understand once you pass away that they can come after your heirs.
Okay. Well, again, that may be someone, an estate planning attorney or someone like that.
Well, they can't come after the heirs unless the heirs have signed on to be obligated under the contract. Now, I think, you know, what he might be talking about is if he passes away, if he's got in his will that it goes to his kids, then, you know, I think his kids can then have the option to pick up that contract. But the timeshare company can't just simply go after his heirs just because he's passed away. They have to have signed on to be obligated to it.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, Joe, I think the best plan of attack may be then having an attorney really review that closely. But I think probably the thing you really don't want to do is just ignore it, because it's just not going to go. Don't completely ignore it and just wonder. And then, you know, frankly, when you're ignoring it, you're always going to be looking over your shoulder or wondering what you're going to get in the mail and say, oh, when's that, you know, that summons going to come? You don't want to do that. That just compounds it. You get an attorney, look it over, and address it. But I'll tell you, his call and his story should be a cautionary tale to everyone if you're thinking about a timeshare.
Right.
We'll take a break and be back with more right after this.